Thank you for coming. And our speaker tonight is Gary Roberson. He's the lead project gardener for the Cycad garden, the Cycad collections. Gary, of course, has been gardening since he was a baby, like all of you. Actually, since he was at age 6, he said he started. And he was involved with the Future Farmers of America, which led him to a couple of internships in Germany and Australia. It's scary to talk about Australia. He first came to us in 1999. He was a gardener in the desert. And he also but then he came back. Florida came back. Cycad collection since then. So he's going to talk to us about the Whitelock collection and how we got it and how we got it and how we got it. Physically, how somebody was asking me, it was a military operation that was all brought over here. So let's welcome Gary. He'll tell us all about it.
Thank you, Kathy. Now, if I remember how all this works. So like Kathy said, I came here in '99. I visited in 1996 with some friends, and I thought, if I ever move to California, I want to work here. And 3 years later, I had an opportunity to move here, and I came right over here on the bus and applied for a job, and Michael Vassar hired me for working in the Palm and Jungle Gardens. So now, let's see, just click. So thank you for coming and being on the tour. I hope you saw some insights and some different looks I've given than you haven't seen in the past. And I wanted to start off with this snapshot. This is March 28th of this year. And it was actually raining. And it really gave the magic and a different, and we haven't seen much of since. So I'm going to talk about the Whitelock Cycad collection, takes right at the Huntington. And as Kathy said, I'm working lead project gardener, but I like to go by the title Cycad keeper. So over 20 years ago, this story really begins with some groundwork that was laid by the former botanical director, Jim Folsom, and Lauren and Eva on where their Cycad collection was going to go. And they both decided that it would come here to the Huntington. And it was through their generous vision that we got this Cycad collection. And they had a lot of rare, unusual, extinct and habitat plants that needed protection and needed to be conserved. And we were probably the best option for that to happen and continue on. They also funded the research set up an endowment. They set aside some money to move the collection here. And we had a nice budget to move. We didn't spend it all. And then, of course, Lauren, early in life, was a medical examiner for the county of LA. And he got a small inheritance, which allowed him to go into designing plants and collecting cycads, and that became his passion. And out of all of his field and horticulture experience in his own garden, by planting and raising from seeds of the cycads, he wrote the book Cycad. That came out in 2002. So let's back up a little bit here. And just get a last shot at Lauren and Eva. Lauren died in May of 2014. And that's when I went to his house in July and spent the first 6 months there reading his book, walking through his garden, inventorying the plants, just getting the feel for the and it was a really peace. It was calming. How many of you had a chance to visit Lauren's garden? I don't know, a number of you. And it was a private garden. You got in there by invitation only, and he let you through, look and ooh and ah. But it was 10 miles north of downtown LA. It was a 2-acre property on a north-facing hill, and that'll be important later. But it was jam-packed with over 40 years of collecting and raising plants, and had filled in. It really kind of reminded you of the time of the dinosaurs. You know, some pterodactyl might be coming through, but it was not only Cycad, like stagnant. He had some palm trunks that he collected, raised them from seed. He spent a number of years putting these little narrow brick walkways into his garden. And the narrowness was designed for a wheelbarrow and to save space for plants. And then at some point he got into succulents, begonias, clivias, bulbs, just a wide variety of interest in plants. And back in the day, in the early 70s, railroad ties were free from the rail yards, and they were being used as retaining walls. Little curvy switchback things up and down the property. And narrow little stairways to get from the bottom to the top and back and forth. And at one point, he needed the railings because the railroad ties were really slick when they got wet. And his garden was overhead with shrub heads. Rare and unusual plants were mixed right in with the regular, well, more common plants, let's say, like Arenaris and Diones and Ceratizamias. What we're looking at here is Henani, which is now extinct in habitat. At some point, he put in baby tears, and it took over, and it became like the signature ground cover in his garden. And there was a lot of light, a lot of texture and colors that were present in that garden, which gave it a real magical feel. Cycas bifida in the back, and the convent woody eye in the front. It was a plant discovered growing inside the grounds of a convent in South Africa. More of the brick walkways. I actually did a photographic study of the bricks because it's a history of brickyards in the local area with the names that are stamped in all the different bricks. And then he went for philodendrons, anthuriums, you name it, it just kept coming along. One of the real special plants that he had up by his house were these Diones spinulosums. It's a male and female pair. You can see the female cone. And cycads are dioecious, so they have male and female separate plants, seed-bearing cones and pollen-bearing cones. So hiding behind those spinulosums was his little greeting garden and gathering spot for entertaining, filled with orchids, rhipsalis, epiphytic cactus, and Spanish moss. And I inquired with some people that were visiting one time, how did he get all this Spanish moss? And he said, well, a lot of the plants from Florida came wrapped in it. So he just started putting it out in his garden. Is the Zoom working? Can they see me? we'll keep going here. This is Lauren's office. It was perched on a little knoll above the garden. You could look out and see Eagle Rock from there. He had a koi pond, and we took the koi too. So, and they're in the Chinese garden in the lake. And Brandon, our orchid guy, has all of his orchids now integrated into the collection. Later in his career, he got into variegated plants and agaves and aloes. And, you know, Jim Folsom said, we don't want to feature those in the Whitelock garden because this was a collection that he developed late in life. And so, and it'll look like the desert garden if we add those. So that was the only restriction in planting the Whitelock garden here was no agave. You did see one, and he had something to do with naming that one. So every garden's got to have a few celebrities, and Lauren's garden was filled with many of them, but the ones that really stand out are the Alabanzii, which was planted in the early 70s from a 5-gallon cutting, and the story goes that it 2 different paths and a picnic table. And then the Platycerium superbum was on his driveway, and you often see pictures of him standing by it and showing it off. It has extra long fertile fronds rather than the regular superbum. And that whole driveway was lined with the regular staghorn ferns Platycerium. And of course, every good Cycad garden has to have a woody eye. The loneliest plant in the world, as Kew Gardens says, because there are no females and they're only males. And there was only one male plant found in South Africa in 1895. It was brought to Durban Botanical Gardens, and the distribution of those throughout the world now all started from that plant. So another thing a good garden has to have is a map. So Tim Gregory started in 2010, going around with Lauren, and he was making notes and doing a spreadsheet, marking on the map where these cycads were in the garden. It took several years to get the information and all collected. So we brought this to Katie in our mapping department, and she turned it into this, which then became our working sheet for each day when we were digging the cycads. And they were labeled WB, means woody eye bin. And so when we were talking with the label people, talking with the people digging, talking with the people planting over here, we all could understand each other, what plants would be coming over. And that led to inventory labels, which were put on in the months after he died. And that was a real fun part of the job because I got to go over there every day, sit in his patio, drink coffee, read his book, look at the map, and put these green labels on. But it was a little harder than that. I had to crawl under, they're all spiny and pokey. And then at some point, the tours were coming. And so anybody that didn't know the plant name, I had to put 3-foot wires on labels so they could just reach in and pull the label out and read what plant that was. And from that inventory label, we get our accession tags. And they go on the plant, in the ground, and on the leaf. So we had three tags that would be associated with that plant. One of them was nailed into the trunk. And that was very controversial at the time because people were saying, you're going to kill him. The nails will kill him. Didn't. And then for an extra layer of security, we put in RFID chips, just like you have in your dogs and cats. So if anything fell off in the move, we could take the chip reader and read that plant. We got a number, we could identify it through the accession. And it also gave us a line of defense that everybody knew and out in the world that they were microchipped. So it kind of maybe helped us not get them stolen. And there was a team at Whitelock's Forrest, who was actually our gentleman here that did the concrete work, sidewalks, and he moved other large collections like cactus from Simi Valley. And so he was tasked with engineering this project. And then Carlos and Ramon provided the muscle. Andrew, who's the curator of non-living things, put the chips in all the plants. And then Mike was the jack of all trades. He was the truck driver. He built every cradle in every different box that we needed to make the move. And then Shadi was here. He's the grounds garden superintendent now, and he planted them here. So what kind of machines do we need to move this? So this is April 1st, 2015. At the Huntington before really anything got going. And this was a 2-acre lot. So we had tractors, and backhoes, even water feathers to help break up some of these things. But over at the Whitelock, we had mini X's, tracks, bobcats going up into the steep hills, and a reach lift, which replaced the need for a giant crane. And we could maneuver in the tight spaces of these. So we're going to take a look at Lauren's diamonds. He was very proud of them. They're in a prominent sunny spot in his north-facing garden. And it's just like, wow, this was going to take 2 years to move all these plants. 640 in the ground cycads, 250 on the driveway in pots that he was selling, and another 400 something in the tropical houses. But before any of this could happen, we had to take all the companion plants. And that's what it looked like into the project. And so how did we engineer that on a steep slope? We started cutting switchbacks. First thing we did was turn off the irrigation. That way we didn't have to worry about breaking any pipes and having floods, and the neighbors below wouldn't get washed out. And you can kind of see how we got them out of the ground, and we got them almost bare rooted. They would be treated and set aside, and they would be lined up for the next day delivery. And we tried to save as many of the brick walkways as possible because the property was being sold. So we didn't want to leave it, totally impassable. But you can kind of see how we worked our way up from the bottom up to the top. So what happened to the celebrities? Alabanzii stayed. It was too large. The trunk was hollow and it was cabled together with wires. So we took 50 6-foot cuttings off it and brought those to reestablish Alabanzii forest over here. And then the fern, we wanted that. So we cut the palm tree down, built a cradle, and shipped it over here and reassembled it in the jungle garden. And the process of getting them out of the ground, we dig around them with the mini X, like a 3-foot square around them, take the bobcat, stick the forks under it, pop them out of the ground, breaking the hold of the roots. And then we come through and trim the broken roots and treat them with a fungicide. But we also laid them over on a pillow of soil. And then, of course, they had to be jockeyed around to get them down the driveway and out to the street. And this is the woody eye. And this is where everybody's gasping at the project going, don't drop the woody eye. Lauren was offered $500,000 for that plant and we turned it down. Now, is that true? We don't know. It's a good story. And there it is going to be. And then we brought it down to Tullamarine, which was right across from a grade school. And then all these children lined up at the fence watching this. And I leaned over to Forrest and I said, there's no pressure. Look at these 60 faces lined up behind the fence. And of course, they wanted to know what we were doing. So we explained we were saving the collection and taking it to a new home. And that was my view driving it through from Lauren's house to the Huntington, down Monterey Road, York Boulevard. You know, we just loaded on the truck and took off. We didn't even think about permits or needing to drive down the street through, you know, the cops passed us and waved, and so no issues. So, you know, we didn't leave the property a moonscape. We went back through, we had recompacted and regraded the soil, uncovered a lot, and left things intact. And then we replanted it with drought tolerant plants in the drip system. So here they are now at the Huntington. This is 2008. This is before any of the berms went in. That was still the. And through Audrey's help, we got the picture today. And then Whitelock's collection joined the Desert Garden, which is an iconic outdoor living cactus garden. It joined the Rose Garden with over 1,500 varieties, a world-class orchid collection. And the original Cycads were purchased and brought in 1909, 1910, and 1913 near the loggia patio and gardens are right there. They were a new item back in Henry's time. And he actually went to New Jersey, picked out the specimens he wanted. They were shipped here, and then Horticultural planted them. So how did we get this all accomplished? Well, in 2000, Lauren came and did a walkthrough, picking sites where he wanted his special plants to go. There was a way to connect the original Huntington Cycads to the new Whitelock area, which is south of the art gallery and the South Terrace. So and this is where he gets his south-facing hill slope to put his diones. And so specifically those terraces were built there for the diones. And then right against the foundation are a lot of the rare and unusual plants that he really felt special and he wanted them there. And part of that was due because there were cameras on the building. There was high traffic in this area, and they felt safer there. Plus security makes. So if you imagine looking down at the Huntington in the sky, every yellow dot that you're looking at is a Whitelock cycad that was added to our around roughly 300 plants that were already here, which then was designed to be a cycad beginning in the visitor and entrance area and coming through the desert into the savannas, the palm garden, the Huntington Gallery, the jungle, subtropical, and I don't know if Kathy saw this, but I'm trying to work a few in over there. And then in the Australian garden, the Chinese garden. They're settling into their new home in the desert. And then the woody eyes are here. So those two, one was from his office and one was from the woody eye bed. The one on the right side is the woody eye bed one. And we had special cages developed to protect the pups. The pups are very difficult to root, and everybody hears they're worth a lot of money, and they don't know that they need to be as big as a basketball before you can even attempt to root them. Try to reach in and steal the little pups. So we created these cages that were non-intrusive, and then they're filled out a little more. And the one on the left is waking up. It's got a new flush or a new cone. It's too early to tell. So in the next few weeks, we'll know whether it's going to be leaves or cones. And then our connection point to the Whitelock garden from the original cycads. And we kept stealing lawn. Every time people would turn around, lawn was disappearing, and we were filming crazy because we're putting in all of these palms. So how do you get a new garden to begin with or mix with an old garden? So what we did, we cracked up some steep pathways and unusable for ADA compliance. We cracked those up. We dug some new trenches, added new water pipes, conduits for electrical, conduits extra for future plans. We actually rearranged some of the paths and realigned them for the new garden. And then they were chalked out and getting ready for retaining walls and paving. The south end of the slope, getting ready for the Diones. This is 2015. And the Cycads were coming over here so fast because what was going to be a 2-year move out turned into a 6-month move out. So it was like steam engines rolling over here. And the property was, Occidental wanted to buy the property and they wanted it really fast. And so we ended up consolidating this whole move. And then in 2016 and 17, we came back and rearranged the Cycads. Some of them got put in improperly compassed and where the trunks were not going the right way because of the north facing hill. So we reoriented them and we had marked every plant with a green dot facing north. So we knew which way to compass them here. And it turns out when they were planting them, the green dots ended up south or east. But it really didn't matter because if the Cycads weren't flushing, the new leaves that would come out would reorientate to the direction they're facing. So we're getting a little closer to 2018. We're getting ready to put in retaining walls and sidewalks. Things are looking a little bit better. They're recovering. When you move a big collection of Cycads or any Cycad plant, it takes a while for them to recover, 5 to 7 years. And we're on the 7th year now. So we're getting full leaf flushes. We're getting normal coning events. And paying attention to Lauren's garden, we decided to duplicate the railroad ties that he used. These are a single pour concrete. The molds were textured to look like railroad ties. And Forrest even made hand stamps of old ends of railroad ties that we stamped the tops so they look like railroad ties. Then the sidewalks went in. And, you know, Lauren liked to drink scotch. So what we did here is in one of those railroad ties, there's a bunch of scotch. So if he comes to visit, you know, he can get to the scotch. We can't get to the scotch, but a little bit of progression. Realignments through existing plantings. It looks a little brutal, but a jungle recovers very quickly. So we came in and framed, poured the path, and a year later, and today. And of course, how do you connect all these terraces? If you don't want to walk the whole length, we put in stairs. And they're the same steep stairs that were at Lawrence, a little more modern, however. And so we began that process by getting the rocks in, because all of this stuff had to come in before we poured the concrete for the walkways. Checking out the grade, putting in the framing, and what it looks like today. This stairway, we thought nobody will use it. Every day there's 4 or 5 people running up and down the stairs to get their cardio exercise. And some of them are octogenarians, so it's very popular. And of course, the rocks. Started with these 5 rocks that were blocking access to the Cycads. And so we crated them up, brought them here, dropped them in the back, and we were going to use them somewhere. We didn't know where. And so one day we were finishing up the berms, and first said, let's put them over by the art gallery. They'll look the same, they look nice, but that's all we have. So it was like, okay, now what do we do? And one day we were over in Irwindale at Summer Stone. They were selling big pieces of this for feature for fountains and landscaping. So we bought a truckload of it. all we could get on the forest truck, brought it here, installed it. And Jim Folsom came and looked, and he liked it. He says, "Well, do you have any more?" And we said, "Well, we'll have to inquire." So we called them up and they said, "Oh yeah, we've got a big pile of it left over from a construction job, reclaimed, and this is Palos Verdes limestone. It's no longer quarried." And so we went over and looked. We took us down there, we picked out a few more. Yeah, 220 tons later. And Forrest talked me down from 19 cents a pound to 15 cents a pound. So this is what's creating the Whitelock rockery south of the terrace, and that developed into a lot of real estate for companion plants, which over 200 of the companion plants from Lauren's garden are now planted in here. So we've got summer bloomers, summer growers, winter growers, summer dormant, all kinds of plants mixed in. And he loved oxalis. And I remember when I was putting oxalis in here, John Traeger saying, "Oh, I don't know, that's going to be a mistake. You might want to rethink that." But it's held up, been able to keep the oxalis under control. Interesting thing about the Aloe Fervetii, that came from cryo. It had been in cryogenics and then brought back to life. And this is a trial in the garden to see how it's going to perform. Fun little things. And I could do whatever I wanted to plant in this garden. The only restriction was no agaves. So I wanted some stick-like plants. I went to South Africa in 2018 and in habitat hiking, looking at cycads. And I saw all of these plants that were stick-like. And so I thought, oh, I got to add this element to the rockery. So a lot of elements are still coming in the rockery. It's collector's place. Some little euphorbias, another euphorbia, different aloe, starfish cactus, Capelias grandiflora, which are this year is very, very prolific in blooming. I don't know if you noticed it when you were through, and it attracts a lot of flies. And the butter tree. And I'm going to end here, not with a sunset, but with a sunrise. And this new flush on the Dioun Mahia. And the new flush signifies that the plants have set their roots, they're settling in, they're happy. And this also represents their future here at the Huntington. And they'll be on display for everybody to see for a long time to come. Thank you, Audrey, for and Audrey was my summer Cycad intern. Stand up, Audrey. So any questions? Just one? That's correct. Some of it was soil piled 5, 6 feet deep. Other ones we did kill the grass and then put the soil over it because we needed to amend the soil with a fast draining mix that contained lava stones, organic material, and some of our own topsoil. That's a good question. What are the losses we had? It ran about 18%. And then some have died or have gone into shock, or they've lost through crown rot. We've lost the top. So I've probably got about 25 that are still in sick bay, which is our rehabilitation area. And they're actually coming back. Some of them look like a heap of just leaf bases, but there's new shoots coming out from underneath. So actually very little loss for such a because for the landscape coming, the question, why did the landscape because to get in there, we didn't want to crush the hardscape that we'd be putting in. And it was much easier with the Trax Bobcats to run on the dirt. In fact, the one sidewalk you saw in the beginning, we covered that with 6 inches of soil just to protect it. But the plants arrived in 2015, and this project has been going on since 2015, and pieces and parts have been coming together and over time. So in 2018, we closed that entire section in February and reopened it in October with the rockery, the retaining walls, the sidewalks. Generally, the cycads do best if they're transplanted in the spring, early spring into summer. You can move some transplants in October, September, October. But if we have a wet winter, they're going to suffer. So a lot of people don't do that. And if the cycads are in, you can pretty much plant them in except for the heat of the summer or the dead part of it's cold and wet. And we kind of break some of those rules. We have to move them for, like the rockery had a leak earlier this year. And we had a sinkhole that went 6 feet deep and 8 feet wide. So we had to take all the plants out, save all the rocks, fix the pipe, reconstruct it, put the rockery back together. And then we had to dig those cycads, set them aside, and then bring them back. Yes. So keeping the orientation from Lauren's garden to cycads here at the Huntington, we did it as best we could. And mainly that orientation was if those plants were flushing at the time, and the flush was greater than 12 inches. So we reoriented the compass points. But it didn't really matter if there were no leaves because we took 2/3 of the leaves off before we moved them. And then the new set of leaves came the same year, the following year, was oriented directly to the way it should be. And no, we didn't see any sun scald on the trunks. You know, remember the trunks are covered in dead leaf bases, and they're pretty thick. Oh, well, that's a good question on how you do a collection like this. Since these were Lauren's plants, the provenance of him raising them from seed, collecting them before CITES with permits and all of that, it makes it priceless. There's not really a way to put a value on it. And that's going to be walk out and do. Did Lauren keep records on the plant? Yes, he did. And all of his notes that he brought from his and Sean was going through the So yeah, there's shipping permits, there's letters of correspondence. Audrey got to go through one of the files for this Platycerium superbum to figure out where that came from and how he got it. So Audrey, do you want to say what you found?
We found it. We- Oh.
Yeah, so that's. Okay, our fertilizing program. In the beginning, I used super palm balance with nutrients and micro and minor elements. And because of the years of drought and not enough water during the summer, the salt buildup in the soil was causing a lot of tip burn in the plants. And we don't irrigate the Cycad garden, but only about every 2 weeks. And so it wasn't getting down in the soil and flushing the salts. So I switched to a formula of Liquinox Grow, Grow More Seaweed, and kelp, and a mycorrhizae that we put in big tanks, and we liquid feed all the cycads with a nozzle and a hose. And I do that once a year. Since we're not a nursery, we're a botanical garden showing a collection. I don't need them growing really fast to produce pups and other things you could take off and sell. And we're not keeping them like habitat. We're somewhere in the middle between habitat and resort. So they still look natural. Their shapes are the same. And some of them we're allowing to grow with all the pups just so you would see what it would look like in habitat. But other ones we will be taking some pups off to share with other back gardens. But once a year, and generally in April.
So when you start the garden, and then how many feet away from the shop, and how many feet they are dig down? Because I think that and more one the top group and also better one look like coral. Yes, so and so you dig different shiny water.
Did we dig the entire root ball when we were moving? We tried to get as much of it as possible. A lot of them are roots that are shaped like tree roots, very round, long cable-like things into the garden. Wherever those get broken, they rebranch. But other ones like the cycads that grow underground, the caudex is under the ground, they have a root system that's more like a turnip. And so we had to be careful. We dug as much of that as we could. But we wanted to get at least a 3x3 root ball on the plants, except for the really tiny ones. Most of those don't have a root system. Okay, thank you.